Okay, grade 7, this is your homework for Monday night, April 15th. Hopefully there's a storm tomorrow and you won't have to come in, but make sure you correct your work. It says from A to A prime, from where to where, and what was the movement. So what is the location of A? Well, the first thing we always have to measure is our X value, and it's -2. So when we put our value down, -2 is our X value. Our Y value is the second one. It's 1 up, so our value is actually -2, 1 for A. And on the A prime, it's 2 on the X and -1 on the Y. So it's almost the opposite of each other. When we think about what was the movement, it was 1, 2, 3, 4 right and 2 down. Well, that's the answer I'm looking for. So 4 right and 2 down was the location or the movement of the point from -2, 1 to 2, -1. A $284 TV after a 10% discount. So if a TV costs $284, 10% of that TV, we know that when we define 10%, we move the decimal over one place. 10% would be $28.40. So we take our TV, which is 284, and we subtract from it 28.40. We get 255.60. Okay, and with 255.60, then they have to put tax on that. So for tax, we have to find 15%. So if I multiplied this by 1, that would be itself. And if I multiplied it by 0.15, that would be the tax. So if I multiply it by 1.15, we remember when we did our calculations that when we take that TV and we multiply it by 1 and 1.5, which is 15%, we get our final price, which is $293.94. And that's the final price of the TV. Your next question is, what is the probability of a 1-1? When we calculate probability, in grade 7 you learn to use a table when it's 2 events and a tree diagram when it's more than that. So how many of them are 1-1? There's 1, 2, 3. 3 of those outcomes out of 16. 3 out of 16, which has a percentage. If we go 3 divided by 16, is 0.1875, which is 18.75% probability. What is the paintable area? Well, if we think about this as being two shapes, this one right here and this one right here. So if I take them down here and think of those separately, this one would be 4 by 5, which means this would be 20 square meters. This one would be 5 by 3. Base times height divided by 2 would be 5 times 3 divided by 2, which is half of 15, which is 7.5. So together there's 27.5 square meters of paintable surface. But from that I have to subtract a 2 by 1 rectangle, which is 2 square meters, and a 2 by 1 rectangle, which is 2 square meters. So I have to subtract 4 from that. The answer for the paintable surface is 23.5 square meters of paintable area. Your next question says, what is this as a decimal? Well, 1 over 25 is equal to 4 over 100, which is 4 hundredths, which is 0.04. And as a percent, 4 hundredths is an easy one. It's simply 4%. Now as a decimal, decimal 2 is read as 2 tenths. That's important because you have to read it properly. And when you read it as 2 tenths, you can write it as 2 tenths, but in lowest terms, that would be 1/5. As a percent, if you got 2 out of 10 on a test, 2 out of 10 would be the same thing as 20 out of 100, which would be 20%. And over here, 4% as a fraction is 4 out of 100. In lowest terms, it's 2 out of 50, which in lowest terms, I did the same thing again. How stupid am I? And since we know that that's that, I might as well just write it here. I wrote the same question twice. Oops. Your next question is your fractions. Okay, your next question is 4 3/5 take away 1 and 5/8. So there's two ways to do it. You can actually take away your whole numbers first and then take away your fractions. But sometimes this fraction is smaller than this fraction and you have to borrow. So in order to avoid that, the easiest method to subtract fractions is simply convert them both improper. So if we think about 4 3/5, if we were thinking about 4 3/5, there is 5/5 over 1. So if I took this and infinite colon, that'd be 2, that'd be 3, that would be 4, and 1/5, 2/5, 3/5. So 4 3/5 would look like that as a picture. And really what we're looking at is this here, those 4/5, that 4 is really 20/5 plus an additional 3/5. So altogether, this is 23/5, okay? 23/5. So the reason why I show you that is this, that instead of thinking of that as being 4 3/5, if we think of it as being, oh, that's not going away. If we think about it as being that, instead, so 23/5, then it makes it easier for us to use equivalent fractions. The next one, 1 and 5/8, this is going to be 8/8, plus an additional 5/8, that's 13/8 altogether. Your common denominator will be 40. So the only problem is when you use this method, the numbers can be pretty big. So that's 160 plus 24 is 184. And over here is 65. So that'll be 119, I think, over 40, which is 2 and 39/40 is an answer. Your next question, same idea. So I'm going to change all of them into improper fractions. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that common denominator. In this case, all three of them will have 20 as a common multiple of 2, 5, and 20. This would be 10/20, which is equivalent to half. This would be, since this is multiplied by 4, this is multiplied by 4, that's 52/20 would be equivalent to 13/5. And of course, 23 would be the same. That would be 62 take away 23 over 20, which is going to be 52, 42, 39 over 20, which is 1 and 19/20. Next one is your algebra questions. We have a coefficient and a constant. When you have both in an equation and you're trying to isolate the variable, the first thing you should do is get rid of your constant first by adding 3 to both sides. Once you have that, you can divide both sides by your coefficient. You get x equals 5. In the second example, you have your constant first. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I get 1/5 of x equals 4. If we think about what this looks like, remember we said 1/5 of x looks like that. How many of those do I need to make x? I need 5 of them. So I'm going to multiply this by 5 to get x, and I have x equals 20. And those were all your questions. So hopefully you got your homework done. I'm going to do a homework check next class, so make sure you have them written down, not just the answers, but the work as well.